Hi everyone, I can hear someone's music playing. Hello everyone, and welcome to this workshop on. Hold on, let me just. Okay, there we are. Yeah, welcome to this workshop on queer leadership and management. My name is Steph. I'm the project manager for the employability and upskilling and mentorship schemes at Blossom LGBT. And for your reference, I use the he/him pronouns. Thank you. We're excited to have you with us this early evening as we dive into the intricacies of queer leadership and management. The professional landscape is rapidly evolving, and diversity and inclusion have become kind of, integral pillars of successful leadership and management. So, as we strive to create more inclusive environments, it's crucial to recognize and celebrate the contributions of people in our communities. Um, at Blossom, we're all about empowering the queer community, really, and particularly amazing young queer service users to reach and find their passion, to be motivated to reach their goals, and do the things that they love the most. In today's workshop, we will delve into the unique perspectives, challenges, and opportunities that young queer professionals bring to to leadership roles. We have asked Aisha, our wonderful speaker today, hi Aisha, to share her expertise and help us in this mission. Aisha is a social entrepreneur and LGBTQ activist, recognized as one of the top 100 LGBTQ trailblazers changing the world. She is the founder of Moonlight Experiences, an award winning company dedicated to the celebration of diverse queer culture and travel by harnessing the economic power of tourism and nightlife. The organization is decolonizing travel and addressing the lack of visibility and services for queer women, non binary, and Black POC members. Aisha is also an integral part of the management team, spearheading initiatives and cultivating a welcoming space for the LGBTIQA plus community at the Common Press, an intersectional day and night bookshop and event space in East London. Aisha's activism and community contribution also extend to her role as head of community engagement for UK Black Pride and as a trustee for Give Out. I will give the floor to Aisha now, and I will be in the background. Oh, by the way, you can see a QR code here. This is for your comments, questions. If you don't want to, if you want to remain anonymous while doing so, please feel free, and we will check them and share them with Aisha later on. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Steph. Thank you for having me here today. I'm so excited to be able to kind of share my experience, some of my knowledge, and some of my tips in terms of when we think about leadership and when we think about management, because we all know that the future is queer, but how can we maximize opportunities, and what are the things I guess we should be aware of in terms of, I guess, the current landscape? I would like to have as many questions as you may have. So if you think of something, feel free to put them in the chat box, or also I can answer them as we go along. You'll be able to also ask questions at the end. I'm gonna share my screen with you, and it's just a little presentation um, in terms of the things that I do and what I've been doing over the last few years. So it kind of takes us through a journey of who I am and the current things I'm involved with. I'm hoping by the end of this, some of them will give you your own ideas, potentially answer some questions that you may have about your next step. But yeah, let's get going. As Steph kind of mentioned earlier, I've been part of the LGBTQ community for a while, but through that, I've worked in many different industry. My career started as a research scientist. I studied chemistry with analytical sciences, and is a kind of career path that I've always wanted. I worked within pharmaceuticals, research, food chemistry. I've worked in environmental labs for kind of oil and gas companies in the past, as well as also working in academia at universities. I mean, working in the science industry was something I truly enjoyed, but as time goes went by, you do realize that there aren't as many people that look like you, in terms of, just the lack of diversity, the lack of women, and also the lack of queer people. And certain traditional industries like this still have a long way to try and be more inclusive. But it's very gradual, it's very slow. I didn't see black women in these positions. I didn't see queer people as much in these positions. So it often kind of made me feel like I had to go back into the closet or not to be my full authentic self when I was at work. This obviously does, I guess, um, reduce your productivity and creativity. It doesn't allow you to be your whole self, and often you feel like you can't be part of the team. So a lot of industries are trying to change this so that spaces in which we find ourselves working in is a little bit more welcoming and inclusive. So I started my own company, Moonlight Experiences, again, similar to the same thing. As queer people, we always find that there are services that are not made for us. And often I found within travel, which I love so much, that a lot of services were predominantly run by predominantly gay white men. And this, whilst I enjoyed it and it gave me a area where I could meet, my community, but it also at the same time failed to address kind of LGBTQ history about Black and queer POCs. It also didn't, offer our own perspective as Black women or as queer Black people, people of color. And this actually kind of stunted my experience when I travel. And so I wanted a company which was able to do that, but also a company that can have community at its heart, which is supporting LGBTQ venues as we travel. I mean, we all know that our queer venues are constantly in decline. They're always closing or not staying open long enough for multiple reasons. And also within the UK in general, there's not enough venues run by queer women or people of color or those who are non-binary and trans. So finding the common press, which I manage, has been a real gift because it just means that we are able to also provide space to our community who often feel marginalized or don't have the opportunity, especially young people, to be able to put on their own programs or to find a space that isn't put only geared to, I guess, nightlife or alcohol or all of these things. So it's important to have a range of kind of spaces for all of us. Um, and then, when I'm still not sleeping, I do volunteer for UK Black Pride as head of community engagement. UK Black Pride 2 years ago broke the record and became the world's largest Black Pride. And UK Black Pride has been around for 19 years. And 19 years ago, I mean, the name Black was put in its political sense because a lot of prides around the world, but also predominantly in London, didn't cater to our kind of diverse queer community. And back then, also, when it started, a lot of people within our own community were resisting for a Black Pride to exist. Often, Lady Phil, who's the co-founder, talks about this, how it was difficult for her. Nobody wanted to fund the event. They said there would never be a Black Pride in the UK. And it started with about 250 people and went up to having over 25,000 attendees. And often there is a lot of issues within our own community where there is also racism, there is also xenophobia or transphobia. And back then, a lot of the people who were involved with multiple organizations were very unkind and cruel and told, the co-founder to go back to where she was from. And these are words coming from people that were in our own community. But yeah, over the years, through finding great allies and people who wanted to support the event, but then also through perseverance, UK Black Pride is now what it is today. I also sit on the board of trustees for Give Out, and Give Out is a human rights charity which pulls donations from all across the world, from individuals and from corporate groups. And what it does is to be able to disperse that money across the world over, I think, 50 different partners, the global south, or whether you're thinking of organizations in India, in African countries, in places where queer people can't exist as much, as also within the UK. All this money goes to grassroots organizations so that they can defend themselves. So, for example, if somebody is arrested for being queer in, let's say, an African country in the Middle East, those organizations have money to be able to support these people. They can support people with venues, they can support people with leaving the country. So it's all about kind of being ready and being resourceful, so that these queer communities can thrive, and they are also doing the work so that they can tackle a lot of the issues in these countries. Um, so I wanted to kind of more now lean towards kind of taking control of your own narrative, but also how you can grow into a field that you might think was not originally for you, but kind of taken space. So over the years, my wife and I, we've run the Queer Nomads. We started traveling the world, doing loads of campaigns, because within the travel industry, we didn't see ourselves in terms of marketing, in terms of media, and in terms of representation. And just through kind of starting an Instagram account, we now work with a lot of cruise lines such as Celebrity Cruises, but big partners within the travel space, and also doing a lot of talks and discussions surrounding what the travel industry can do better. We're also actually launching group trips for the LGBTQ community, and also wanting to make sure that as we grow up, or especially as young people, we are able to also generally discover the world, because our community doesn't always have that access, whereas there are multiple, um, let's say, gap year trips and loads of group trips for straight people, but that doesn't exist in its entirety for our community. So that is something that a new project we're working on, just so that moving that around the world can feel less hostile, but also more enjoyable with other LGBTQ members. But now, I guess I just wanted to touch upon what needs to change. How do we build not only queer leaders, but queer leaders that can go on to carry on inspiring the next generation, but also actually taking space in terms of running their own companies, employing other queer people, just changing the narrative, really, because most industries have predominantly men who are at the top, not often queer people, not often queer people of color. But how do we start to kind of change that? And that really stems from, I guess, us as queer people taking those leadership position, but also creating our own companies in the way we wish it was initially created, which is to be diverse and which is to be inclusive. I think over the last couple of years, a lot of things have changed and shifted in terms of how we see the world, especially when, I guess, Black Lives Matter kind of happened because of George Floyd. We would see people putting on the Black Square on, their pages and profiles. But then the moment that tide kind of quiets down, a lot of people just forget about it and they're not doing the work. And I think, as queer leaders, this is something that we need to carry on pushing, and this can be for anything that is going on at the moment, whether it's to do with tackling transphobia, xenophobia. There's a lot of discussion around asylum seekers and refugees, and all of these kind of topics and discussions as queer leaders is something that we can push forward and kind of amplify. Just to add to our, I guess, our pride movement, just to add towards, the need for more equality, the need for more equity and inclusion. Um, so a lot of, I guess, people and customers or whoever you want to target as you move through your own journey, they are wanting places to be more inclusive. There is this need, big push, especially as more and more of Gen Zs are kind of identifying as part of the LGBTQ community. There is this kind of growth within our community as a whole. And so, really, now, every single business, regardless of who you are, is important to do better and to cater to all people from diverse range of backgrounds, regardless of what you do. So it's absolutely now becoming imperative. So it's important to build this into anything that you are wanting and or will be doing or are currently doing at the moment. But one of the things I wanted to also touch upon is intersectionality. What does it mean when we talk about intersectionality? I mean, over the years, a lot of people have been using it, especially in the DEI space, because they want to be more inclusive. They want people to understand that they are thinking about diversity, but intersectionality goes quite deep. I mean, when we're talking about intersectionality, we're talking about, you know, social identities such as gender, race, ethnicity, social class, religion, sexual orientation, all of these all kind of put together in a unique way, which kind of make us see the world in a different way, but also results to us either experiencing opportunities or lack of, or experiencing barriers because of, for example, who we are, because of our sexual orientation or race. So, for example, for me, my parents came to the UK in order to work because there was a massive push for more nurses. So she came over to the UK. So I come from that kind of generation, but also I'm a Black woman. I was brought up as a Muslim. So because of these things, all of who I am, the place in which I grew up. I actually grew up in Nigeria after being born in London. I moved back to Nigeria and then came back to London. That really shaped in terms of my perspective, in terms of how I saw the world, and also in terms of essentially being looked at as a foreigner because I didn't sound like everybody else. The way in which I expressed myself was very different from other kind of Black British people in the UK. And then kind of experiencing a lot of that kind of xenophobia or racism kind of puts together different things for us to think about in terms of how we view people and individuals. I guess the way in which I see it, I tend to say that we've all been dealt cards, and those cards, some cards might be better than others, and some cards will give you more opportunities than other people would. And it's really important in terms of how we look at the world and how we utilize those privileges, and use those privileges to potentially do better, to be able to support other people in different ways. So, yeah, it just depends on what you are able to do. And if you're somebody that has those position of privilege, then it's also realizing that privilege and also making sure that certain things are put in place so those who don't have that can also thrive to kind of level the playing field. Because when we think about certain people within society, they often are at the bottom. They often have a harder time to be able to succeed than other people. So when we think about intersectionalities, thinking about how all of those factors play a part, and also how we have our own unconscious bias. So as leaders, there's a lot to think about in terms of the individual. And as I mentioned before, even within our own LGBTQ community, all of these biases exist, all of these prejudice exist, and discrimination as well. There are multiple accounts of like, for example, queer women not being allowed to go into certain venues, or if those who are non-binary or trans having an awful experience in LGBTQ venues because they don't feel as welcomed as well, or they are just discriminated against. So as leaders, always putting things in place so that I'm being aware of these issues. These are a couple of kind of, I guess, diverse kind of imagery that I work with another in a campaign so that it can be more inclusive. I mean, the reason why I'm kind of showing you these are obviously example which are predominantly themed around travel, because within the travel space there is lack of representation. There's always tends to be the same faces that I would see, whether it's within kind of luxury travel, within luxury travel or travel in general. Often white people are used, often straight people are used. You don't see anybody who doesn't fit that mold, whereas travel is actually very inclusive, should be very inclusive and open to everybody. So when we're kind of thinking about the imagery and the things that we use to promote our services, it needs to not be excluding other groups. So making sure it's authentic, because for so long, many people use diversity as a buzzword. They'll use diversity, but not kind of mirror it with diverse range of people, for example. But then authenticity is, again, not doing things to be tokenistic, because often that is what happens. It's like, oh, we must tick this box and we're doing it just because we have to, and it's not as authentic. Other people look at trying to solve this problem by recruiting, like, say, a diverse range of people, but then once they recruit those people, their actual workplaces do not have policies to support that particular person, or actually the work culture might be quite toxic in terms of not being very aware in terms of how people speak, or how they might assume your gender, or how they talk about, for example, women, which could be quite crude or inappropriate. So although some people might recruit because they think it's the right thing to do, then that work culture doesn't actually mirror a inclusive kind of workplace. Um, I've touched upon representation, which is really important. And also, this is something that is important to think about so that you can build that from the top and throughout your whole company, throughout your own organization, all the team members you might be collaborating with, you might be working with. So, this is truly important in terms of how you think yourself as a leader, or how you manage whatever you do. And then inclusion as well. There are a lot of people out there who you might not be um, aware could be interested in what you do. So building a diverse customer base is very important, or improving what you have, or starting to build it from the ground up, or in and just making sure that at the heart of everything you're doing, you're actually including and having that as at its core from the get-go. So it's not something you have to think about later, because it becomes part of the DNA of your company as a whole. This is actually one of my favorite quotes by Audre Lorde. So Audre Lorde talks a lot about intersectionality, and I think this, for me, kind of touches upon how I try to remember different, how I try to make sure that I implement kind of an intersectional lens in terms of a lot of things that I do. She says that I cannot afford the luxury of fighting one form of oppression only. I cannot afford to believe that freedom from intolerance is the right of only one particular group. And I think this kind of, for me, helps sums up what it means to kind of put an intersectional lens on things, because it's not, whatever we're building should not be just for one particular group of people, and built to kind of exclude others deliberately or not include them. This is not obviously applicable to kind of, I guess, spaces that need to be protected. You know, across our community, we have different spaces, events that are geared towards maybe Black queer women only, or trans people only. All of these spaces need to happen because unfortunately we're not in the position where we could um, have those, have a world where that's not needed, because of the amount of like issues we still have. So those spaces need to be protected and need to kind of exist, but at the same time, when you're trying to do something that is open, that is a bit more commercial, it's making sure that you're representing the whole, everybody, and that you're representing the people, other people, so that they can use your services. I mean, for me, another thing that she said was, without community, there is no liberation. So essentially, what at the heart of everything I try to build is community. So whatever it is, if you have this community, you're also able to achieve a lot more. But in also this sense, it's also like a value that I hold quite dearly, because we know also all around the world not everybody has the freedom or the liberation that they deserve. And so it's important as a community to carry and also champion in that. I mean, recently, because my family are from Ghana as well as Nigeria, Ghana anti-LGBTQ bill was announced recently, and it's also just like a reminder that although where we are, we could, you know, we do have some, a lot more rights. Not everybody has that across the world, and it's important to keep amplifying that, because I mean, we cannot be free until all of us are free, really, because essentially, at times, we see across the world a lot of policies are changing, the way in which our community is viewed is constantly changing. So it's good to keep on kind of that pride movement across the things that we do, and the roles in which we take, whether it's within companies or not. Um, some of the things that I think is important to be able to kind of understand within management is thinking about, I guess, these five key points, which is the team that you are in, or the team that you want to build, for that to be as diverse and inclusive as it should be. You know, thinking about how do you involve people who have access needs, or whether who are neurodivergent, how do you build things in place to allow them to also be part of the team? You know, because when you have a more diverse team, you are more likely to be more productive, you're more likely to have more creative ideas, and also, you know, a diverse team, I think, is just far more fun, and you're able to achieve a lot more. Another thing to keep on thinking of is marketing. Inclusive marketing is important because people really want to be able to see themselves, and often a lot of people don't feel that something is for them if they're not able to see themselves reflected. And then one of my favorite is community engagement. Um, the power of community, despite the fact that we live in a very digital world, is very important. And this is a community that can still exist digitally, but also is important to build them, I guess, offline. Because, you know, as you saw earlier with the quote, the, you know, Without community, there's no liberation. And I think it's important to understand that that can still be a driving force for anything you want to start or anything you want to create. A community of like-minded people, whether they are friends of yours that you have the same interests, whether they're people that you've got to know because of what you're building currently. That community engagement is so great because you get great feedback. And as a queer community, we are also very loyal. So if you do get like a really good community, they will come back to use your service, buy your products over and over again. And it just kind of champions what you do to others so that they can join you as part of that journey. And then the next thing to think about, which kind of brings everything together, is diversity, equity, and inclusion within, I guess, what you're going to be doing, whether now or in the future. And that kind of touches upon all of the things I've mentioned already. But one of the key thing on there is also equity. When I'm talking about equity, is also being able to go into roles and kind of get promoted in certain businesses that you may be in or companies that you find yourself working, and also going for new roles and finding out whether there is a career progression in the job that you're starting or in the job that you're building. If you start getting people, what would be the next step in your company? How do we start increasing equity? Because often that is a part that often a lot of queer people find themselves not going up the ladder, especially if you find yourself as a queer Black person or person of color. Often we get paid less as our other counterparts, and also women. There is a massive gender pay gap as well, where women are often being paid less. And whilst at some point they started to close, a little bit more, is kind of starting to widen again. So that's also something to be aware of, making sure that you are also being paid fairly in the positions and role that you're doing, and that there are opportunities where you can also amplify yourself or learn new skills to be able to take those positions. And I think it's also about asking if you are interested in a particular managerial position in the future. Asking your boss, what do I need? I'm really interested in doing something particular within the company. What do I need to do to get there? It may be you might have to upskill, you might have to do some courses. Whatever it is good to be aware, because then you can use that either for the next job that you go to, or to work your way through the existing one. I guess then the next part is networking. Networking, I believe, is a crucial element in, I guess, leadership, but in terms of management, because through networking you can also learn a lot, but also is how you meet people on contacts. I tend to find a lot of the opportunities I've had is through networking, but it doesn't happen instantly. Often it would happen months later, and actually years later. Certain opportunities I'm having now was because of the networking or the people that I've met through community engagement years ago. I mean, somebody I met 7 years ago in San Francisco got in touch and wanted to do like a whole series of talks with me and wanted me to support them with their new brand. So all of this didn't happen overnight, but it happened kind of over the years through that initial networking and community engagement. And also is a way of networking, of finding people that may fit all the things that I mentioned. You might find somebody to fit your team, to be part of what you're doing with marketing, to support the DEI things that you're doing. So you might find consultants, because if you're not able to, if you don't have the skills, you might need to meet people that have those skills so that they can support the work that you are doing. So I think in that sense, it's just about putting yourself out there, which at first might seem scary, but it gets better as you gradually meet more and more people, or when especially you find yourself in the right places. So really think about where you're networking, who you want to engage with, and actually try to think about how niche you can go in that end. Okay, so just to kind of start slowly wrapping up, but I think I'll really like to potentially hear from more of you so that we can talk through a little bit more about what you're thinking about doing. But the biggest thing is making sure you are taking the lead. Taking the lead in terms of building things that can have a positive impact. So that could be geared towards, like for me, it's travel, is activism within the community, but also making sure wherever you end up that you are prioritizing diversity, using inclusive language, identifying areas of improvement, and then also being very active within the community. So that you can learn, you can grow, and you can help create change. Allyship. I mean, this is an interesting one because allyship, I mean, anybody can be an ally. You don't have to be a woman to believe in women's rights. Allyship can be a range of things, can be so many things. So being able to educate yourself potentially on a particular area that you don't know about is really, really important. Doing research, whether that's through books or online, but also through volunteering, which I think is a crucial part about also trying to learn more and to support other groups. And volunteering also can happen through workplaces. So certain people would actually allow their staff members to have a couple hours a month so that they can volunteer, maybe 3 or 4 hours a month. But through that, I think it's also acknowledging your privilege and also, speaking up for challenges and injustices. These things, whilst they might not be something that you may put in your work, depending on what it is, but it's also like a form of personal development, which really can help in terms of the way in which you view leadership, in terms of the way in which you might want to be a leader or manage a particular team. So yeah, I hope some of these kind of key points, including like team membership, team management, and network, and all of these things, when you put in place, can help you in terms of your next steps. Um, but I also want to kind of say early thank you now. Um, because yeah, it's wonderful to be able to be here today so that we can actually um talk a little bit more. So I'm thinking I'm gonna start going through some of the questions I'm getting through now. um oh, right, okay, so I'm just looking now. One of the question is actually about how to overcome the stereotype that I'm aggressive. Yes. Oh, thank you for putting that up. When trying to assert myself as a leader. Also, okay. All right, cool. I've got it. So, how do you overcome the stereotype that I'm aggressive when trying to assert myself as a leader? This is very, very difficult because there is a certain perception about who we are, as I don't know who you are, but who we are and how we behave. There is an unconscious bias that tends to happen where I would say, if I'm using my own kind of experience, where predominantly Black women are being viewed as aggressive because they speak their mind or there's something that they want to speak against. um, the way in which I think you approach it depends on the situation. It's very hard without knowing, but I think it's about also speaking to whatever person who's above you so that you can be able to air out your frustrations or your feedback, so that it can be action in a more kind of effective way. Um, being aggressive is something that we hear a lot as Black women, or people of color, to be honest. And I think this is something a lot of companies need to do better to change that work culture, because being assertive doesn't always equals to being aggressive. And I think that this is not a you problem. This is obviously the company lack of kind of changing that toxic work culture that exists. But I think it really needs to be action by speaking to somebody higher up. And if that person doesn't still understand, and I think then it's just about kind of realizing how much work you want to do. Because as queer people, we often have to do a lot of the work for other people, and potentially evaluating how that might affect your own mental health, I think is really, really important, because being labeled that constantly is not something that is going to be healthy for you. So it's important to also evaluate how much you are giving of yourself towards this particular role. Um, I think it's seen a different way of also of the situation. I think it's very hard. I wish I could get an example to be able to give you a little bit more. But right now, this is a issue that the company needs to do to be better. And sadly, I know full well they're not doing this enough in most industries. But I'm so sorry to hear that you are experiencing that. If you are happy to share a little bit of, what you mean, I'll love to hear that, or even after, that will be fine with me. Um, I guess the second question is, do you think it's worth studying management and leadership at university? Oh, this is a very, very good question. For me, studying made such a big difference in terms of the person I wanted to be. Um, so studying this particular topic really depends on what you want to do and where you feel you want to go. It would equip you with a lot of like skills, a lot of knowledge in terms of how you could be a great leader or to be in management. But I think I find that is important to learn also at the same time, through actual jobs as well. Because whilst studying can give you a lot of the theory behind it, in terms of how you can become a good leader, it's also about actually doing it. And those two don't always translate if you're not able to put it in practice. Studying at university also have its own perks, I think is important part of personal development. It's not the only way to kind of experience different things, but being at universities has its own advantages and then its own disadvantages. The only thing I can say is I think it's important to understand where you're going, because then this course will really equip you a lot better. If you're not sure on the things that you're doing, sometimes I see a lot of people pick topics, because they may panic, they're not sure what to do. And then later on, it's got nothing to do with their interest, it's got nothing to do with their future career. That doesn't mean that it's wasted time, but it means that if you could, I think, do review the things that you want to do. Think about your interests. Think about the things that you're good at, the things that you're passionate about. And if doing this management and leadership course feels like the right thing to do, then I think that would be your journey and that would be a good place to really start and kick it off. Okay, so I guess the next one is to do with books or resources I could recommend for leaders who do not have an extensive knowledge of queer or women issues that are looking. Oh, okay. As a go-to job. I don't know if you've been to the venue, the Common Press, which we mentioned earlier I'm part of. We have a lot of books and a lot of resources, not just one, multiple. If you're not able to come to the venue in person, you'll be able to also find some of the books online. Which you'll be able to also have and buy, or to be able to have a look at some titles. But I would say um, books by Audre Lorde, I think, is really, really good, and it's like a classic to must read. And it really, really varies. I think also if you are into poetry, that could give you a little bit more of an insight within kind of queer issues and in terms of what's going on at the moment, and also learning a little bit of LGBTQ history, I think is important, because this is a topic we don't actually get taught in school. So you do actually have to make a lot more effort to learn about the past, because it really helps, you know, understanding the future and the things that need to change. What do we have? How do you overcome imposter syndrome and get the confidence to put yourself forward as a leader? You know what? This is a very, very good question. And you will find potentially 99% of people, or most people in leadership position, have felt that way or carry on feeling that way. Um, so the way in which you overcome it is actually no secret. You just have to do it. You really just have to do it. You have to take the little steps if to do it. But what is actually interesting is this stat that um, if you are I mean, I'm talking about predominantly cis men. If you're a cis man and you see, let's say, a job position, so it could be a promotion, it could be just a job ad, majority of cis men will believe that they are good at that, they will be good at that job, and they deserve that job. And this is based on them being able to only do 30% of what is needed to kind of fulfill that requirement. But as women, women think that they need, let's say, something like 70 to 80% to be able to do 70 to 80% of what's written on there, or what is needed for that particular role or promotion. And this often can put you back, not because that it's not important for you to be fully qualified, because actually I find that most roles that you would go for, whether it's leadership position, is something you can actually learn. It's not something you can learn on the job as well. It's not something that you have to be fully qualified from like 100% before you go in, because an element of any job is also learning on the job. So you need to also give yourself room for that. And that imposter syndrome might be because actually you don't feel like you have the right skills, which actually potentially you do. And also maybe believing in yourself in terms of how you can adapt to the role based on previous experience, based on, I guess, what you feel passionate that you want to do. And uh, thinking this through might be a bit hard, but the more you think about it, the more you believe you can do it, I think it may give you a better, I guess, boost to go for it. So whatever position you feel like you want to go to, or this might be for a future question, future position, really, really go for it and start speaking to somebody that is already doing that role. And if you don't feel there's somebody you can talk to, research that role. What is actually needed? Potentially upskilling yourself might make you feel more confident to go for it. But I feel like if you're asking this question, you might actually be ready to go for it. So yeah, I'll say give it a go. Okay. All right. So this next question is about running the common press. How does it feel to manage a space where you see yourself reflected and to create a non-club space for the queer community? So the common press, as I said, has been like quite a real gift for our community, because it's actually was given to us by an ally. And because there hasn't been many spaces where I could see myself reflected, where as soon as you walk in, it feels inclusive, it feels warmer. It really makes me kind of proud, but also makes me um, I guess, grateful that we can build a space where I guess more young people can come in, where if you don't want to constantly go out at night, where you can come and actually meet your community, where you can connect. And this is really, really important in terms of how we navigate the world and see ourselves. And this comes to kind of what I was talking about, intersectionality. For so long, our queer community had to hide um, and find ourselves like in nightlife culture. And this wasn't necessarily a bad thing because we got so much out of it in terms of creativity, fashion, art, you name it. A lot of kind of queer culture and a lot of the things we have today in society came out of, the queer community. But also as times is changing, not everybody also drinks alcohol, but those spaces were never created. Not everybody wants to constantly go out at night. So it's also about having options for people. So for me, creating this space, I'm starting to see actually something that we don't just need in one place, but we need it all across the UK, but also all across the world. I meet so many travelers who really, the moment they come into the common press, they're like, why don't we have this in New York? Oh, we wish we had this in LA, or we wish we had this in Spain or France, wherever they're from, because there really, really isn't, um, s- there is really isn't a space that has an inclusive, um, that doesn't have that inclusive environment or vibe. Um, Also, oh, there's a fourth question. Oh, right. Okay. So this question that I'm reading on the side um, is to do with struggling to be the only manager slash leader who is practicing inclusion. Oh, right. I see. Um, who is practicing inclusion, empathy, and understanding at most of the places I've worked in. Okay. So this is to do with like kind of struggling with practicing inclusion, empathy. Okay, I get it. I think it's very, very difficult when you find yourself as, I guess, one of the few people, if not the only person, who is pushing this particular kind of work. This does result to burnout. And of course, if you find yourself like having tight deadlines, also at the same time being able to practice self-care, being able to look after yourself, sometimes these things get left behind because again, you are the only one. So it's important to make sure that potentially having like a resource group to support would be a really good idea. But also being able to, I guess, be honest about the workload. I think it's also good to be able to think about, is your workload kind of too much based on the time that you have? Sometimes this might be it. And I think it's important to be honest about that, because the last thing that you want is suffering from burnout. And especially when you're doing such work, you'll find your own mental health kind of being affected. And you want, essentially we all want to be the most productive that we can be, but also really making sure taking a step back can also help with that. I hope that has answered your question. But yeah, I think that is very common to find yourself being the only person in that role. So really, I think focusing on self-care is key for that. Okay, I think, are there any questions before we slowly wrap up? Okay, all right. I think that is it. Okay, cool. All right. Okay, we are all good for questions for now. I don't know, Steph, did you want to come back to say a few words?
Um, yes, but I was hoping because your last slide had your contact
Oh,
details, so uh I wanted to ask if you wanted to keep that on.
oh yeah. Hold on. Let me.
Okay,
Oh, there
I
you
I've
go.
put it I've put it up. Yeah, I've put it up.
Oh,
I just wanted to double check. Um, okay, sorry, I was reading a message. um, I'm still processing everything you've said. This was really, really wonderful, honestly. Thank you, Aisha, for taking the time to do all this and to share your experience with us, personal and professional. This truly inspiring. I love this, honestly. And thank you for everyone who's with us on all of our social media channels: YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm trying to read all of the stickers that are, sorry, all of the logos that are on. um, I I hope well thank you for your questions. Some of these questions were really really good. Um, I hope this session has inspired some of you or all of you, uh, and provided you with the tools that you need to understand management and leadership. Um, I would, before we conclude, I'd like to say, like, remember that the learning journeys don't end here. So Aisha has kindly provided us with her contact details that are gone now from the screen for some reason. Um, we will pop our email address in the chat, info@blossom.lgbt. If you have any more questions, if you have any, I don't know, requests maybe for future workshops that we can hold, I would really love to hear your feedback. It's very essential to us. So take a moment to share your thoughts, suggestions, anything that you would like to share with us. And please keep an eye out for our upcoming events. We've got some cool ones lining up. Take a look at the website, the social media. We've got Eventbrite as well, and the employability and upskilling scheme in April. Are we in April? No, we're in March. So in April, we've got an online workshop that's going to be on thriving beyond work titles. So that's really going to target your well-being at the workplace, and provide practical and creative approaches to cultivating a sense of self-worth in the workplace as well, and throughout your job seeking experience, because it is really draining. And our in-person one is going to be on candle making. It's going to be in Guildford. So please keep an eye out on Eventbrite. They should be coming up in the next couple of days.
and,
If you also, sorry, you want to say something, Aisha?
no, I just wanted to thank you again, Steph, and thank you everybody for taking the time to be here. And you are always all welcome at the Common Press, at UK Black Pride, or any of our group trips or anything that you see. Yeah, it'll be wonderful to meet you all in person at some point too.
Oh yes, please come. Please, I mean, I say come to the Common Press because I go there a lot. But but please, yeah, do go to the Common Press. It's a really wonderful coffee shop in Bethnal Green. Um, Spend a lot of my time there. You might see me, but if well, I might not know you, probably. um, so yeah, just keep an eye out on all of our social media posts, chats, posts, and our websites, and all of these. Um, yeah, I'm trying to read them. The ones that Haisha has provided as well on the screen. And yeah, thank you everyone for participating. Aisha, honestly, really, thank you. Um, uh, I can't thank you enough. I mean, I've known Aisha for a while. I think it's been 3 years since we've known each other. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah, when it feels weird to thank someone I know so well.
I,
So,
I know.
but yeah, if you have any more questions, feel free to send them, and I can either forward them to Aisha, or you can just email Aisha directly, and yeah, we take it from there. Thank you everyone for coming
Thank you.
today.
Thank you, and take care, everyone.
Bye.